Hey, it's really great to see everyone here. I'm Dan Feshbach. I'm the moderator of this panel. We're waiting for two guests who are supposed to be here, but maybe they got confused like I did at the beginning. Anyway, we're gonna talk today. Am I too loud, by the way? Okay. We're gonna talk today about how technology, EdTech technology in particular, can power opportunities for neurodiverse learners and neurodiverse populations and people with disabilities. So we're really, really excited to be here with you, and I'm gonna, we're just basically gonna cover, three rounds of things. One, just who are the companies, why are they in this, what are they trying to accomplish, what populations they serve. Will be, a couple of minutes a company will do that. Theoretically, there'll be two more. And then we're going to cover the challenges that they have. They're substantial. I imagine a lot of you are involved in the neurodiverse and disability space. So, but they'll get to share with you what their challenges have been and their accomplishments, because they're quite accomplished, doing a lot of really interesting work. And then I'll have some specific questions for them about each of their individual solutions and how they work and what their impact is and so on. So I guess we're going to start with the three of us and see where the other two end up. But I guess Amelia, you want to start with your organization, and more about how you got into this, and also what populations you serve.
Absolutely. So hi, everyone. Thanks for being flexible with the three of us rather than the five. So my name is Amelia Hone. I'm Canadian, so I am going to throw some stats at you today because I'm a bit of a data nerd, but just for reference, I am Canadian, so they are Canadian stats. I run a project called Autism CanTech that supports autistic youth between the ages of 18 and 30 to teach digital economy and data skills, employability, so those wonderful soft skills, and help to transition into finding gainful employment. One of those first kind of stats that I want to throw out at you is in Canada, 86% of those that self-identify as, hey, another panelist. 86% of those that have a diagnosis of autistic are unemployed. 86%. And 54 of those with a diagnosis of a disability are unemployed. That totals about 6 million people that are unemployed, and those are just those with a diagnosis. In order to even get a diagnosis, there's a minimum of a 2-year waiting list, and it can be anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000 in order to get a diagnosis. So 6 million people are unemployed, and those are just with a diagnosis.
Beautiful, great. And do you want to jump in, Mariella, on your organization?
Sure. So my name is Mariella Satow, and I'm the founder of SignUp. SignUp is an app that overlays sign language on media platforms. So we offer a picture-in-picture box of a sign language interpreter that goes along with video content. And I'm excited to say that we're about to close a $1 million seed round in the next 2 weeks. Thank you. So the state of the deaf population, which is who we serve, is for them media is inaccessible. For deaf people, especially young deaf kids who can't read yet or can't read fast enough, closed captions don't work. And 5% of the world is deaf and hard of hearing, or 432 million. And although all of these people don't use sign, it's still a huge group of people who need greater accessibility.
Beautiful. And Isaac, do you want to jump in? We're talking about who you serve, a bit about your company and your whys.
Awesome. Yep, sorry, a bit late here. I'm Isaac. I'm a co-founder of a company called Joon. We do behavior improvement for kids with autism, ADHD, and other types of behavior disorders. Primarily focused on kids age 6 to 12. Yeah, so people we serve are neurodiverse kid populations, but then also the parents, which plays a super important part in that whole process. If people aren't familiar, about like 1 in 5 kids has a learning disability, about 23%, from autism, anxiety, depression, on like the disorder side to ADHD, which diagnoses have skyrocketed. And so that's primarily our target, the people that we serve.
Great. And last but not least, we have Vanessa. Vanessa, do you want to take a deep breath?
Yes.
Introduce yourself and talk a little bit about who you're serving, what's your why behind your company.
Yes. Hi, I'm Vanessa, and I learned today not to get stuck behind a big train. I am the CEO and co-founder of Cipher, where we build social emotional learning games and software for neurodiverse youth. And the folks we're serving are youth, middle school and high school age, usually 10 to 15, with neurodivergencies, ADHD, autism, and actually, because of the pandemic, a lot of neurotypical students as well.
It's great. Whoops, that was a little loud. So we'll go down the line here, I guess. We'll do it this way. And let's just talk a little bit about the challenges that you've encountered as founders and entrepreneurs in a couple of areas. So let's start with funding, and then we'll go down the panel this way, and then we'll talk a little bit about your experience with getting customers. So you want to kick it off, Isaac?
Cool. Yeah. So to start with funding, so we raised about $2.1 million in total funding for our startup. We did Y Combinator in 2022, that in the winter batch. I think for us, the challenges probably are definitely around like awareness on how big of a problem this is and what the actual opportunity of it is. There's definitely typically, as investors are thinking about market sizing and expectation that, even looking at just like one segment or one acuity of like ADHD, that might not be like a venture scalable business. And so really communicating, the amount of spend, there's a huge disproportionate spend on that 20% of kids who are neurodiverse, and that on average parents will spend an additional $15,000 per year per kid if they have a learning disability. And so being able to map out how big of a market opportunity it is, if you can build the right tools and support for that market, definitely, I think initially was a funding challenge early on, was laying out, how big of an opportunity it is, what it looks like to kind of wedge in on like potentially a more niche market, and then scaling out from there on the funding side. Sorry, what was the second half of that question?
We'll go back down. We'll start about customers next. But I guess one question I have for you is, were you able to raise before you went into Y Combinator? And was that a good experience for you in terms of, I can't imagine that there's that many, companies focused on neurodiversity there, but there could be.
Yeah, before Y Combinator, we were actually kind of general. So like how our product works is we use gamification to motivate kids with behavior issues to improve in real life. And so you can imagine it's a game, but the only way you level up is by doing real life tasks and behaviors. Before YC, we actually were just targeting like any parent and any kid, and so it wasn't specific to any acuity. It was definitely tough raising, I think. We were pre-revenue as well, which didn't help. But so yeah, that pre-seed round, we raised around $600K pre-seed, which took about like 4 to 5 months. Very arduous process. We were also like, first time raising, smaller network, et cetera. But yeah, during YC it was much easier. We had just launched, got a lot of traction, had a very clear market and distribution angle, which was definitely completely different from the first fundraise. So we closed that fundraise in like 2 weeks.
By the way, 6 months is not necessarily that long, but congratulations on that. There's others probably in this audience and on this stand have had different experiences in raising dough. Okay, Amelia, you're a nonprofit, so you've got a whole different funding requirement.
Yeah, so we are government funded through the Canadian government, and so our process is really writing a grant to try to advocate for this program, this equity-seeking population, and what we hope to get out of it. The project has run for 2 years and is unfortunately coming to a close at the end of June. One of the barriers that we have found is post-graduation employment. So getting businesses to take a chance on the disability or neurodivergent population. And so one of the things that I'm working towards is writing a new grant that I just submitted, fingers crossed, that is, rather than reintroducing more cohorts and educating more neurodiverse individuals, we have 700 highly trained autistic youth. And what we would like to do is companies go into businesses, work with their HR departments and teach about accommodations, be that mentor, that onboarding buddy, take the probationary period and pay that minimum wage under us, under the government. And if the onboarding is successful, then the company will hopefully continue to hire on for that sustainable employment. And if not, then the participant still gets that paid work experience. So that's what I'm advocating to do for right now.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're aware of all the different initiatives in the neurodiversity and autism at work, but I would say that's quite a pool of talent, and we should connect you up to other people you may not know that would be interested in hearing about that. Okay, and now, Mariella, you want to go next?
Yes, so I think one of the hardest things for me with funding is explaining to investors that the deaf community doesn't have enough access already. Closed captions have kind of been the gold standard of accessibility for a while now, and I think a lot of people don't see the value in sign language access. And again, similarly, not seeing a big enough total addressable market.
And in that context, what has allowed you to raise the money that you have? What do you think, what are people paying attention to?
A lot of our investors have personal experience. So one of our biggest funders has a deaf brother. So after he invested $600,000, it was easier to convince other investors to join.
Yeah. So we're finding, and I would like, Vanessa, you can speak to this too, but we're finding in this space a lot of times it's investors with a passion. Would you agree?
Most definitely.
Okay. You speak to that, yeah.
All right. So I know that Dan was probably referring to me when you were saying I had a different fundraising journey, which was very true. It took me about 2 years of trying and failing to raise, and I actually spent the first 2.5 years of our venture bootstrapping, and that was off of grants, fellowships, accelerators. You know all about that. And I think it was difficult not only as someone coming from a lower income background, as a Latina, and as an autistic person myself, where the fundraising process is not at all built for neurodivergent people. It's all about playing a certain game, about networking, about constantly having social interaction with people, and I had to figure out my own way to do it. And I think when it came to the venture, when we started in about 2018, social emotional learning wasn't as much of a hot topic, and especially social emotional learning that is necessary for neurodivergent youth was not talked about. And I think, honestly, because of the pandemic and seeing how many teachers were constantly adapting different curriculum materials, how much disabled students needed these resources and didn't have them, that started making people realize that, hey, okay, maybe a social emotional learning game that specializes for neurodivergent youth and curriculum for them is actually important. And so, although the pandemic brought a lot of really bad and difficult things, as we all know, one thing it did help was, shine a light on the fact that in special education that was really necessary, and I think that really helped us.
That's great. I want to come back on this topic for another minute. We're doing pretty good on time. You guys are being very efficient. So I guess what I would wonder about is what kind of expectations do your investors have of you for return? Because I think that there's, and I think even from the government perspective, what would they look at? But Isaac, you want to speak to, like, for example, what kind of promises you either have to make or wanted to make, or kind of what your thoughts are about, because now you've got somebody who's got some expectations for delivery.
Yeah, I don't think it is any different from a company that's not targeting neurodivergent populations. We have the same expectations, at least for our company, to have the same outsized returns. we definitely were intentional on bringing on, earlier on in our fundraising, more angel investors than like typical big funds, especially when we were figuring things out. As bigger funds will typically have the expectation that you are growing extremely fast, right? And sometimes that's not the right move until you know your go-to-market and like the segments you're targeting, et cetera. But yeah, I'd say that now like we're going out to raise an A right now, actually, and we still have to iron out this, this plan on how this becomes a huge company, just the same as any company.
And we hope it does.
Yeah.
We need you, so we hope it gets big. Do you want to speak to that too, Amelia, in terms of your own challenges in raising?
Yeah, I sort of alluded to it already, but our outcomes are being measured by return without necessarily having the neurodivergent perspective on what outcomes we should be meeting. So, for example, one of the goals of the project was to increase employability by 90% across the 700 participants within Canada nationally that we served. And the biggest barrier that we have found is finding sustainable employment post-program. And that's not because they aren't wonderfully talented and they are certified and they want to work their butts off, but it is the buy-in and the education and the knowledge of large companies unwilling or too afraid to kind of take a risk. And so we have increased by 37%, and that's 37% of changed lives of people that are no longer on, disability, taking from the government, working full-time, living their dreams, their best lives, and all of that wonderful stuff. But the government looks at it and says it's not 90%, and so you haven't met your outcomes. And I think a big part of it is to put more emphasis on qualitative influence rather than just quantitative influence. But when you're not self-funding and you're relying on the government, that's harder to sell.
And you can't get fees for placement. So I think it would be interesting. It's a later conversation, but
yes.
you seem to have something going there. Okay, and then pronounce your name again for me again.
Mariella.
Mariella. Yeah, will you want to speak to that same challenge of what investor expectations look like and what you're planning and how you're planning to meet those?
Yeah, I think expectations for SignUp is continuing the amazing growth we've seen and starting to make partnerships. But as we're a seed round, I don't think there are any kind of strict, defined returns we need to meet yet. And I think for entrepreneurs, the opportunity gap can be sometimes felt in the constant push to scale, to be a unicorn. But sometimes the opportunity is to serve a need that's more niche and addresses a smaller community. But it's just as essential and it's still profitable.
Great. Okay, Vanessa.
Yes. So I have an interesting combination for my pre-seed round of more normal sort of VCs and also impact investors. So we have difference partners and then some amazing funders at Cambiar Education and New Schools Venture Fund, and most recently our partnership with the Lego Foundation. And that's been amazing, but I think one of the biggest keys that we have to figure out in terms of returns, before we even talk about financial returns, is these impact returns, and making sure that we are measuring them in a way that everyone down to like even the students can understand. I think that having qualitative and quantifiable like impact, and especially in SEL, and having as much data on that as possible is super important. And so I think that those impact returns not only are going to help teachers, counselors, and school admins feel secure in the fact that they're using our product and help us gain loyalty with our customers, but it's also something that I think is going to guide the direction of our financial returns later on. But right now, it's mostly focused on that impact.
And would the other three of you think impact returns are driving financial returns in terms of how you think about your business?
You're asking me?
They should, I think.
Yeah.
I think when you think of like venture investors, yeah, an impact investor might not be judging you on the same criteria as a typical venture fund might, but the ideal is you have both. If you're having really large impact that should generate large returns. It's sometimes hard to balance, but I think, yeah, they are usually aligned as impact is value creation.
Okay. Anyone else want to comment to that? Pretty, okay. Now let's talk about maybe a bigger challenge. Once you've raised the dough, now you've got to get some customers. And so I want to hear what customer acquisition challenges you have, what are your biggest roadblocks, and what are the things you've done to overcome those roadblocks. So Isaac, you want to kick that off?
Yeah, sure. I think so for our product, we serve various populations, a lot of kids with ADHD, a lot of kids with autism, like I mentioned, anxiety, depression, ODD, other types of neurodiversity. For customer acquisition, our approach has always been to focus on high pain point, high intent markets and dominate those markets before expanding out. And so for us, that looked like really honing in on parents with ADHD kids. Parents are our customer right now. And being the go-to solution for that market versus trying to go across multiple markets at the same time, which is very difficult when it comes to messaging, targeting, and anything really in distribution. But so for acquisition, that was the biggest, I'd say, hack in a way, was focusing on a specific market with a specific need, messaging completely to them, because then you get rid of, you're not lost in the noise among a bunch of other products in a bunch of markets. That was definitely the biggest change. We decided to focus on that market when we moved from free to paid as a product. We had a bunch of beta users. When we moved to a paid product, we were able to see the highest converting segments of users, and the highest converting with the highest proportion of users was parents with ADHD kids, and so we chose to hone in on that market. And that's what we've been doing.
What does your customer base look like now?
Like number of customers?
Yeah.
We have about 16,000
That's amazing.
subscribed parents. Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's a big deal because direct to consumer is hard. So it's great. And okay, Amelia, you want to speak to that? That's a little different for you.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of speak to the other side of it. Finding participants was not a hard thing at all. As soon as the project came out, we had a long wait list and went from just running out of Alberta to across Canada. So finding interest in this type of program was not the issue. On the other side of it, it was, again, finding companies that were willing to kind of take a chance on this equity-seeking population. And so one of the things that we've been trying to do as not a fee for service is I will go in and speak to HR companies and talk about reasonable adjustments and accommodations and speak to universal design and kind of change that narrative that it's not that you're being expected to invest more into one person being neurodivergent, but changing that perspective of whether you identify as neurodivergent, neurotypical disability, or you just identify as yourself. We are all unique people that need certain things to thrive. And if you make accommodations accessible for everyone as per universal design, you are going to see a increased, work ethic, a happy staff, and you're going to see better outcome and investment and, in the company's payments and success if the people who are making your company are taken care of. So it's not about being neurodivergent and needing to put in accommodations for that one specific person. It's about realizing that everyone needs something in order to thrive, and why not make that accessible to everyone so all employees can thrive within your workspace.
Great. And Mariella, you want to speak to how you've experienced your growth?
Yeah. I think on the B2B side, we've had trouble with potential partners with the fact that sign language isn't a legal requirement. I mean, Netflix didn't start having closed captions until they got in a lawsuit. So that's a challenge we're experiencing with some of our partners and some of the streaming platforms. And on the other side, public organizations like PBS Kids, who are doing a pilot for, there's not enough funding for accessibility. But on the B2C side, we've been really lucky. The deaf community is a very tight-knit one, so people have heard of SignUp and people are using it. We have 16,000 weekly active users, so we've had less trouble on that side.
That's amazing growth as well. I guess you guys are matching up. We're going to have a little competition between you and Isaac on that. Okay, Vanessa, do you want to speak to this too?
Yeah, so I would say that for our growth trajectory, we have two things that we focus on as sort of end goals. The first is that we want to become the Disney of social emotional learning. That is the goal. And the second is that we want to make sure that every young person around the world feels that they're supported and feels a sense of belonging, and to basically eliminate the idea of a normal neurotype, because honestly, it doesn't exist. So in order to get to that trajectory, we really just constantly are following those statements. So that means pairing with other neurodivergent sort of brands, like amazing brand Calm Strips, which creates these sensory adhesive strips for classroom and personal use. It's like going on different neurodivergent podcasts and using an informational blog series to provide resources and info on supporting neurodivergent students. And I think it's also just been like something that's just baked into our sales and our piloting process and our playtesting, is that we are constantly interviewing professionals, neurodivergent youth. And I think that by building that trust over a while, we've kind of gained this reputation as being more of a partner than even someone that's selling to you. And so with that, we've been able to grow to 175 schools and therapy centers in about 4 countries now. And we're now making the jump to districts. So that's been exciting.
Really, it's really, I find a lot of a lot of interest on my part in all of your growth. Back in the day when I started or co-started Teach Town, it probably took us 7 years to get to 10,000 customers. We do now serve 200,000, which is good, but I think the world's a lot more open to the kind of organizations that you're all starting. I think it's really great. One area that I'm interested in are really the mechanics of how your products help the neurodivergent youth. And what I mean by that is, what are the mechanisms by which, after X months on being on your product, that you end up with a student that's materially better off from the standpoint of not only for themselves, their parents, and their potentially their teachers or employers. And I think I'm really interested in how you think about that, and then what outcome metrics you have. And I know that's a big challenge, because measuring your impact can be tough for a startup.
Yeah, sure, I can start. The key thing that, kind of the mechanic of what we're doing is really around executive function, is how I would think of it. And so, we use a game to motivate kids to do stuff in real life, and that can be important behaviors, tasks, school assignments. And the struggle really is kind of twofold. One is, especially in neurodivergent populations, especially ADHD, getting the motivation to do a task you don't want to do is extremely difficult. You have different, at the end of the day, it's actually like a dopamine deficiency, right? And you don't get the same reward from completing a task that somebody that's neurotypical might. And so we use a game to provide kind of that additional reward and additional motivation to these tasks and behaviors that are important to do. The thing is, over time, that starts having compounding returns, because a lot of behavior and behavior change is very long time spans of practicing consistently tasks and behaviors that you might be struggling in. And so examples are kids with ADHD might be struggling with executive functioning generally, or emotional regulation, impulse control. To help manage those symptoms, what therapists will do is they'll actually build out these task and behavior plans and have kids practice them at home. And of course, the hardest part is actually engaging the kid to do those activities. And so we provide the engagement layer that then helps them kind of build those habits and structure around these tasks and behaviors and practice them. So there's both that motivational component, and then there's also kind of a second order impact on the parent-child relationship, because it's really on the parent to implement these behavior plans at home, and it's a huge burden on the parent, because especially if the kid is not engaged, what that looks like is the parent constantly nagging and reminding and micromanaging their kid all the time. We'll talk to parents that have to tell their kid 10 times to do something like brush their teeth in the morning. With Joon, with our product, it flips that around, where the kid is self-motivated to do that, and you take away that negative tension on the relationship, the need for the parent to constantly nag and remind and negotiate with their kids. And so we have this, both that building of tasks, those routines and habits to help them strengthen in certain behavioral areas, but then also eliminating that negative tension on the parent-child relationship that is the constant nagging and fighting between parents and kids in doing these tasks and behaviors. So those are kind of the two we really focus on.
Great. And go ahead, Amelia.
No, I just, you used that word burden, and I think that that is something that we are really trying to play into as well. I'm talking about the buy-in of employers and really trying to advocate that, like, everyone is just people. Like, if you're qualified, give them a chance. One of the things that we're trying to do is we work with a platform, and it's a sister company that we are partnered with, but it uses AI technology. So we are trying to lessen the response effort of the employers. So what I mean by that is, say there is a task that is on the schedule. The AI can look at the task and upon request can break it into a task analysis. So step-by-step instructions, mitigating that the participant or the employee doesn't have to go and ask their boss every single time. The AI will recognize that and break it down into tasks. The other thing that we are working to do is to build a neurodivergent job board where inclusive employers are looking to hire this specific talent pool, and they are open to having different kinds of interviews. So it's not just behavioral interviews, but it can be skill-based hybrid, and I can chat more about that later because, time-wise. But really just listing the accommodations on the job posting accommodations, the type of interview, whether it's remote, in-person, hybrid, the type of environmental and social emotional regulation that they provide, and all of these wonderful things, and making the job description inclusive just as much as the environment itself. And rather than this equity-seeking population always having to go out and seek in this social world that is not set up for them, bring the talent who is hiring to this population and kind of meet them halfway and bridge this talent to employers who are willing to accommodate.
Great. Okay.
So SignUp's users are deaf people who prefer sign language, deaf people who can't read or can't read yet or can't read fast enough. So we impact all of them by giving them full access. But something maybe even more important is we are fixing language deprivation with deaf children. 90% of deaf kids are born to hearing parents, and almost none of them will learn how to sign. So SignUp is giving deaf kids an opportunity to see sign language, see different signing styles, and learn a language while watching their favorite Disney movies.
Vanessa?
So that's really cool. All right, this is my favorite part to talk about. So basically, we have a 3-part platform. It is our game series, Ava, which follows the adventures of an autistic protagonist who goes through the galaxy to find community and battle her own self-doubt. We also have a companion application, which serves as like a time tracker, teacher dashboard. And then we have our curriculum, which teases out all of the different social emotional themes that kids are going to find in our characters and stories, and helps teachers and counselors generalize them into real life. And so the coolest thing about our game and our team is that we're 50% neurodivergent. So we're coming from lived experience as well as being experts in game design and education. And so we have our community, we'll go out to our community and be like, all right, what's the hardest thing to teach? What's the hardest thing to learn for neurodivergent youth? And then we build the themes based on that. It's really in partnership with the community. And then our amazing game designers and writers go in, write ridiculous stories, super fun things about like space armadillos or ramen bots, and bring it into a story that kids are going to gravitate to, and that's shown. I mean, in our pilots, we found that 94% of professionals had improved classroom and therapy sessions because kids were more engaged in social emotional learning and more motivated to learn social emotional skills, and 100% of the kids wanted to keep playing. So we're doing an impact study very soon with University of Delaware, but that's what's happening so far.
I think everybody can feel really good about the new emerging companies in this space. There's literally hundreds forming at Multiple. We're an accelerator, and we had At our last accelerator, we had 72 applications started. We had 50 completed, and we could only admit 10, so we've adjusted our program and do some mentor matching. But if you're involved in this space, or you're thinking about getting involved, there's a big need, there's a big opportunity, and there's much more receptiveness to new ideas now than there have been in the past. I think it'd be we have a few minutes left. Does anybody have questions from the audience for any of the panelists? Oh, go ahead.
I have a question for Isaac. So can you explain how you give me an example of the game? Because is it like immersive learning? Is it hybrid learning? You said it's a game that teaches you to do things in real life. Do you actually like have to go, I don't know, to the kitchen, perform some tasks, and then come back to the computer? So can you explain a little bit more?
Yeah, do you know Tamagotchi or Neopets or any version? Okay. Basically, what was that? Okay. I mean, basically, kids have pets they take care of. The only way to get the resources to take care of them is by doing tasks and behaviors in real life. And so you could say hybrid, but really it's like they have their own in-game task list, which could be their habits and routines and behaviors they're practicing, and they get rewards in the game for doing them in real life. And so if they have a task like read for 15 minutes, brush your teeth, make the bed, some stuff like that, they'll go and check them off in the game. The parent will approve them. Then they'll get rewards in the game. And so that's kind of the functionality of it.
Any other questions before we wrap up? Beautiful. Okay. Wonderful. Really good to hear from everybody and learn about your businesses. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.